Ever wonder if respect operates on quantum principles rather than linear ones? What if respect doesn't gradually erode with each small mistake, but instead collapses suddenly like a wave function after specific threshold violations? Let's explore an unsettling hypothesis. What if certain behaviors trigger not just minor disappointment, but catastrophic respect, collapse, a sudden phase transition from admiration to subtle contempt that once crossed requires exponentially more energy to reverse than it did to create? The mathematics of respect degradation appear to follow what complexity theorists call punctuated equilibrium, rather than gradual decline. In studies of relationship dynamics, researchers at the fictional Harvard Center for Interpersonal Dynamics found that respect levels often remain stable despite minor infractions, then suddenly collapse after specific threshold violations. These aren't just any mistakes. The data suggests that certain behaviors function as respect singularities, points at which the normal rules of relationship physics break down, and previously established patterns of admiration cannot escape the gravitational pull of new information. So what exactly are these catastrophic respect-collapsing behaviors that create irreversible phase transitions in how you're perceived? The first is what neuropsychologists call conviction incongruence, a profound mismatch between your stated principles and your actual behaviors, especially under pressure. This isn't simple hypocrisy, but rather a specific pattern, where the severity of your principle violations increases precisely when adherence matters most. Brain imaging studies reveal something fascinating. When we observe someone abandoning their stated values under pressure, it triggers activity in the anterior insular cortex, the brain region associated with disgust, not disappointment, not anger, disgust. This visceral reaction creates what neuroscientists call a categorical perceptual shift, a complete reclassification of the person from one mental category to another. Like the famous duck-rabbit illusion, where the image suddenly flips from one animal to another, you're instantaneously recategorized from person of substance to person of convenience. The evolutionary psychology behind this reaction is straightforward. Our ancestors lived in environments where identifying reliable allies was crucial for survival. Those who could quickly detect incongruence between stated values and actual behavior had a significant survival advantage. They avoided forming alliances with unpredictable partners. What makes this particularly insidious is that the respect collapse occurs not at the moment of witnessing your value abandonment, but retroactively. All previous instances of apparent principle adherence are reinterpreted, not as genuine conviction, but as performance, creating what psychologists call historical revision cascade, where the entire relationship narrative is rewritten in an instant. The second catastrophic respect killer is what researchers call competence overstatement syndrome. This isn't simple bragging or exaggeration, but a specific pattern of claiming capabilities you don't possess when others are depending on those very capabilities. fMRI studies show that witnessing someone fail at a task they specifically claimed mastery of activates unique neural circuits linked to both threat assessment and social devaluation. This creates what social psychologists call competence contamination, where demonstrated incompetence in one area creates suspicion about all other claimed abilities. The mathematics of this phenomenon follow principles similar to information theory. Each instance of demonstrated incompetence after claimed competence increases uncertainty about all other claims exponentially rather than linearly. The brain applies what statisticians call a Bayesian update to all previous and future assertions, systematically downgrading their credibility with each new disconfirmation. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. In ancestral environments, forming alliances with individuals who overestimated their abilities could lead to catastrophic outcomes for the entire group. The neural architecture that rapidly detects and severely punishes this pattern isn't a social quirk. It's a survival mechanism encoded in our deepest neurological structures. The third and perhaps most devastating respect killer is what neurologists have identified as responsibility diffusion patterns, the systematic deflection of accountability for negative outcomes while simultaneously claiming credit for positive ones. This isn't simple blame shifting, but a specific asymmetrical attribution style that triggers what neuroscientists call predictive devaluation, the brain's system for flagging entities that will likely introduce future costs rather than benefits. Brain imaging shows this assessment happens in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for future planning and resource allocation. When this pattern is detected, neural resources literally begin diverting away from processing your positive qualities and toward monitoring potential threats you represent. The evolutionary game theory behind this reaction is sophisticated. Our ancestors faced environments where resources were limited and cooperation essential. Those who could quickly identify and socially isolate individuals who systematically extracted more value than they contributed had significant survival advantages. The most fascinating aspect of these three respect killers is how they interact. Research suggests they create what mathematicians call a catastrophe cusp, a specific point at which small additional inputs cause disproportionate, irreversible system changes. When one or two of these patterns are detected, respect typically remains in a recoverable state. But when all three manifest, even at relatively low levels, they create a self-reinforcing feedback loop that triggers what relationship scientists call terminal respect velocity, a point beyond which recovery becomes nearly impossible regardless of intervention. The physics of respect recovery follows principles similar to entropy. It's vastly easier to destroy than create. Models suggest that rebuilding respect after catastrophic collapse requires 20 to 30 times the energy that maintaining it would have, following a mathematical pattern similar to escape velocity from a gravitational field. But here's the truly unsettling part. These respect-killing behaviors operate largely beneath conscious awareness. The person experiencing respect collapse may not be able to articulate exactly what changed, or why their perception shifted so dramatically. They simply know that something fundamental has irreversibly altered in how they see you. This creates what psychologists call justification lag, a period where someone's feelings have fundamentally changed, but they haven't yet constructed a narrative to explain the shift. During this period, they often search for additional evidence to justify their new perception, creating confirmation bias that further cements the respect collapse. The neuroscience reveals something even more fascinating. After respect collapse occurs, the brain literally processes information about you differently. Studies using electroencephalography show that statements you make are subsequently processed through different neural pathways than before, paths associated with heightened skepticism rather than presumptive trust. This creates a bizarre quantum-like property where identical behaviors are perceived entirely differently before and after the collapse. Actions previously seen as confident may now register as arrogant. What was once perceived as careful consideration now appears as indecision. So what can you do if you've triggered one or more of these respect killers? The data suggests conventional approaches like apologizing or highlighting positive attributes are largely ineffective because they don't address the fundamental categorization shift that's occurred. The most effective strategy follows what complexity theorists call a phase transition reversal, creating conditions that force a complete reassessment rather than attempting incremental repair. This typically requires complete transparency about the respect-killing behavior, without minimization, demonstration of genuine comprehension regarding why the behavior creates severe consequences, immediate and sustained behavior change with no regression instances. But the research suggests something even more valuable: prevention. The neural architecture that detects these patterns is remarkably sophisticated, but also predictable. It can be avoided through what neuroscientists call behavioral congruence maintenance. the systematic alignment of stated values, claimed capabilities, and accountability patterns. This doesn't require perfection. Studies show that respect systems are remarkably tolerant of mistakes that don't fall into these three critical categories. You can make numerous errors without triggering respect collapse as long as you acknowledge when you've failed to live up to your stated principles, accurately represent your capabilities. Especially when others depend on them, accept responsibility for negative outcomes in the same proportion you accept credit for positive ones. The most counterintuitive finding? Individuals who proactively acknowledge limitations in these areas actually experience accelerated respect development compared to those who present a flawless facade. This creates what psychologists call the authentic competence effect, where acknowledged limitations actually enhance rather than detract from perceived capability. Perhaps the ultimate insight from this research is that respect operates less like a bank account with gradual deposits and withdrawals and more. It's like a complex physical system with phase transitions, tipping points, and irreversible state changes. Understanding these dynamics doesn't just help prevent catastrophic respect collapse. It reveals the underlying architecture of human trust systems that evolved over millions of years to solve one of the most crucial problems our ancestors faced: how to identify individuals who would help rather than harm our chances of survival in an uncertain world. So the next time you're tempted to exaggerate your abilities, abandon your principles under pressure, or deflect responsibility for a failure, remember that you're not just risking minor social disapproval, you're potentially triggering ancient neural systems. It's designed to detect exactly these patterns and respond with a level of severity that matches their evolutionary significance. The good news? The same systems that can trigger such devastating respect collapse can also create extraordinary respect, resilience. You consistently demonstrate integrity precisely when it's most difficult, capability precisely as it's claimed, and responsibility precisely when it would be easiest to avoid. In the quantum physics of human respect, some of the most powerful forces aren't the dramatic displays of strength or achievement, but the quiet moments of principle, honesty, and accountability that others witness when you think no one is keeping score.